You had the idea while you were at Riff, but talk to me about how you and Tom decided to pursue this new format, because it was It's hard to believe that started in the 80s. It's been that long.
I was at Riff as program director. We were doing a fair amount of research, of course. How could we not? And we started hearing in the research two different messages. The younger people in the audience, and back then the demographic was a little different than it is today. Our target demographic was 12 to 34. That was the sweet spot. Those were the baby boomers. And our teens were listening to the radio station and going, I like the new stuff, but when you guys keep playing the Beatles and the Who and all that stuff, it really kind of feels dated. And then on the other side, our older audience, our kind of early 30s listeners, were listening to some of the new stuff coming out and going, I don't know if I'm really enjoying what's going on here. I don't like this corporate rock, and who's this Elvis Costello guy, and I'm not sure about the Cars. And so as the program director of stations like Riff and Wheels and W4, you kind of had to play everything because that was the definition of the format. But, the consultant in me started thinking, what if you could actually split the format out and create a version of it that really catered to the older stuff, that really captured the older audience right where they live, the stuff they grew up with. And so Bender and I started having these late-night conversations. He was in Dallas at this point, and he was the general manager of a damaged AM news station that was dying. It was in big trouble, and he was looking for a format. And back in those days, playing music on AM was not totally stupid. You could actually have an audience and still make it work. Right. And so we actually started thinking about maybe this kind of format that we're thinking about could become a reality on your AM station. And I remember he and I spent hours at his apartment literally going through his albums cut by cut, kind of deciding, that would fit, no, that would not, that type of thing. And it was a very broad collection of older stuff, but the bottom line, it was kind of Meet the Beatles, 1964 through the Cars, 1978. We kind of cut it off at that point, sort of arbitrarily, right. And it worked. And we put it on Tom's AM station. The station was called K-Rocks, KRQX. It was originally called Good Time Rock and Roll, believe it or not. I did some focus groups for the station early on, and while listeners loved it, they could not parrot back the slogan. And when I finally just said, okay, the slogan is Good Time Rock and Roll, they kind of looked at me and went, meh, like, that's not really kind of what it is. And I said, well, how would you guys describe it? And a number of people said, I would call the music classic. That's really what it is. And Bender and I just looked at each other and said, let's call it classic rock and roll or classic rock. And that slogan had been used in radio off and on over the past couple of years, but nobody made it work. I think there were some people who got onto the same slogan idea that we did, but didn't really have the format underneath it right. And we had the slogan and the format, and that was kind of the key. So when I started my own consulting company, I had a lot of Ed Christian stations to work for, but my side project, my side hustle, was seeing if I could lift classic rock off the ground. And Ron, I spent 2 years pitching this format to anybody who would take my calls. And back in those days, I didn't know anybody. I knew the ABC family, and beyond that, I was totally unnetworked. So people would not take my calls, and I had a hell of a time, and I was about ready to give up on the thing. And I got a call from a guy named Jeff Crow, who was programming this loser Class A AC station out of Charlotte, Michigan. It was the fourth AC in the Lansing market. And Jeff had seen me speak at the Great Lakes Radio Conference the year before about classic rock and this format idea that I had. And they were just desperate enough to actually think maybe we should do that. And he got his boss, who owned the station, Bob Ottaway, to meet me in Lansing. We had lunch at Beggar's Banquet, and I pitched the format to Bob and Jeff, and they said, let's do it. And we signed the thing on, and it exploded. And then that's it. You know how it works in radio. It's a lemming business. Once you get one win, everybody's like, whoa, what's going on? And it wasn't long before I signed Kansas City. Jay Hoker, my boss at Riff, started his own broadcast company and wanted to go classic rock in Kansas City. So we signed on the Fox, and then Los Angeles came in, Chicago came in, CSX. Bender was now back in Detroit, and it was time to do classic rock in Detroit. I mean, just imagine, being Tom Bender and Fred Jacobson, having somebody come in and doing classic rock across the street. Oh, no way. So Bender was wise enough to know, you know what, this is the moment where we got to make this happen. And he flipped Magic, which is what 94.7 was, into CSX, and it was a smash. So that's how it grew. Wow. And Ron, nobody is as surprised as I am. And, you said earlier that the format has endured for, really 35 years, but it has. And it's found new audiences and younger audiences and the kids of baby boomers and the grandkids of baby boomers. So it's been an amazing run, and format is probably as viable today as it was 20 years ago.